Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Wherever you are tuning in from, welcome. My name is Rebecca Minkus Lieberman, and I am one of the co-founders of Orot and the educational leader of the Peaceful Parent Project. So glad to be here with you this afternoon for a few minutes. This is the first in a series of several Facebook Lives that we'll be having in the next several weeks, leading up to the Special Peaceful Parent Cohort that we are going to be launching at the end of February for parents of teenagers, which I'm really excited about. Being a mom of three teenagers, excited to harness the curriculum, the teachings, and the different practices in the core Peaceful Parent program to specifically address and direct the teachings and the learnings towards what it looks like to parent children through their teenage years, which can be a really challenging experience. I can tell you from my own life and from many other parents of teenagers' lives. So today, before we begin to think about, well, what is it? What are some of the issues that we can begin to unpack? What are the pain points specifically of being a parent during the teenage years with our children? I thought that we would first kind of do the stepping back and looking at, how do we imagine the path forward, which involves some taking stock of where we are in this moment as parents, and doing some assessment, some reflection on where we are and what is working well and what is challenging, the shining spots and the rough spots in our daily parenting lives. But before we do that, I thought we would just take a few moments to let ourselves arrive together. If you're watching this live or you're watching it later on, just take this moment to check in and to settle in with your breath. Let your body come to a place of quiet. If it's in the middle of a busy day, just give yourself the gift of a few moments of stillness. Take a few deep inhales and exhales. Slow inhales, breathing in the air through your nose. And slow exhales. Just a mini pause, a mini refuge from the busyness of our days. To give ourselves permission to pause. To be quiet and still. To let our bodies relax and soften. And letting ourselves have a moment to just rest our attention on our breath right now, right here. Temporarily giving our minds a breather from paying attention to all of the things that are coming in the future and all of the things that happened earlier today. Leaving the past and the future to the side and just resting in this present moment. Opening and feeling our bodies soften and relax into what is here right now. Letting our breath be soft and gentle. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes again. So today I wanted to go back to Torah and use a certain parsha, a few verses, a few psukim from Parshat Lecha as kind of a roadmap for thinking about how we can even begin to do the work now that we've kind of paused and centered ourselves. How can we begin to do the work of looking inside, looking around us, and beginning to assess where we are with our parenting and what does it look like in this moment and what would we like it to look like in this moment. So in Parshat Lecha, in Breshit, in Genesis, the Parsha begins with some well-known verses directed from God to Avram. And this is the first instance of communication between God and Avram. And famously, God says to Avram, Lech lecha mi'artzecha u'mimoladetcha u'mibeit avicha el ha'aretz asher ar'eka. So God, before there's any kind of relationship with Avram, God appears to Avram and says, Lech lecha, which is a really interesting phrase in its own right, that's sometimes translated as go forth, but there's a lot more to unpack there. Go forth from your native land, from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. And God goes on to say that if Avram does this, if Avram undertakes this setting out, this going forth, then God will make of Avram a great nation. God will bless him, make his name great, agadla shemecha, veheye bracha, and you, Avram, will be a blessing. And it goes on to say, God says to Avram, I will bless those who bless you and curse him that curses you, and all of the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. So returning to this first phrase, Lech lecha, this setting forth, this moving forward, I want to talk for a minute about how I think as parents we can understand what is being communicated to Avram and how we can take these ideas into our lives as parents. So I've always loved that phrase, Lech lecha, because it's two words that are kind of smushed together. Lech means to go, and lecha means to you. So go to yourself. So there's kind of a multi-directional aspect of this command, this instruction. So there's a going out, there's a stepping out, a moving forward, but then there's also a looking in, right? So there, it feels almost paradoxical. Lech lecha, go out to yourself. So I think really to me, the way that I understand this phrase, especially for the work that we do at Orot and the work of Peaceful Parent, is that in order to begin any journey, in order to begin any kind of transformation or work or practice, we first have to look inwards. We first have to do that lecha, like turn the view kind of and flip the view so that we're looking at ourselves first. Because before we can take the first step towards any kind of transformation or change or begin work that we want to do, we first have to look internally. We have to look within ourselves first. And the next few parts of the verses help us understand what's required sometimes to do the work. To do the work after we do that inner looking, right? What else is involved in that? It's not so easy to just look inside and kind of do, I mean, that's hard in its own right? To do that internal taking stock with honesty and with compassion. But what else is involved? So we can see that the kind of the paradigm that's laid out in this verse and these several verses in Lech Lecha are really such beautiful instructions for us as parents and for just us as humans. So I think one of the things that's involved is that there is leave taking that's required sometimes. Before we begin any kind of journey or transformation, we have to consider what we have to let go of. And in the verse, right, it says, go forth from your native land, from your father's house. In order for Avram to begin this new journey, this new part of his life, he has to leave certain things behind. He has to let go of the place that he has been at, his native home. He has to leave behind his father's home, his childhood. So I think this is really offering us a profound lesson in thinking about if there are certain aspects of our parenting that are not working for us right now, for whatever reason. There are many reasons that we can have difficulty in areas of strain in our parenting lives. Part of the work, I think, involves thinking about what do we need to let go of, whether it's certain assumptions about what the parent-child relationship is supposed to look like, certain assumptions we have about ourselves as parents, judgments of our children that we have, or expectations that we're holding for our children. And I also think it sometimes involves some letting go of our own past, our own childhood, the parent-child relationship that we had with our parents, right? Sometimes those past stories, those pieces of our past narrative, the relationships that we had growing up, sometimes pieces of those elements are not serving us in moving forward and in thinking about what is the path that I want to be on as a parent right now? And are certain aspects of my past hindering me, serving as obstacles or holding me back, right? So sometimes the leave taking that has to be undertaken is within us, right? It's the own assumptions, the own judgments, the own expectations that we're carrying with us about how things should be or could be or have to be, right? And sometimes we need to acknowledge that we need to let some of that go, that we're not going to be able to move forward and make any kind of change in our parenting lives and the relationships with our children if we are holding fast to some of these components. So I think that's one piece. I also think that in this instruction that God gives to Avram, it's a pretty bold ask for God to just show up in Avram's life and say, leave everything you know behind, and I'm going to take you and I'm going to show you where you're going to go. God doesn't tell him where he's going to go. He doesn't lay out the path or the route for him. There is tons of uncertainty and unknown in what lies in front of him. And I think that's very similar with parenting. We don't know how our children are going to turn out and develop and where their roadblocks are going to be. We have no idea what the journey of parenting is going to look like ahead of time. It would be great if we did, but we don't. And each child brings with him or her different components that are challenging and unsettling. So all of that uncertainty in parenting requires a lot of acknowledgement of that uncertainty, acknowledgement of the not knowing. And I think it also requires some trust. That in order to take the next step forward, we have to have an element of trust that we can take the next step forward, and that although we don't have all the answers and although everything is not known and we can't be certain about much that's coming in the future, we can cultivate an inner well of trust that will help us feel more, I think, calm and peaceful and at ease with whatever comes our way. And finally, I think that these verses in Lech Lecha also bring us back to this idea of blessing, right? The word blessing, some form of the word blessing is repeated multiple times in these verses. And so what is that about? What does it have to do, I think, with our parenting? I think when we're about to do the hard work of taking stock and figuring out what is not working, what is working well? Where do I really have to like change the story? What habits do I need to alter, right? As soon as you begin to even think about, okay, I'm going to do this work, it requires, I think, not just the letting go and not just the trusting, but also cultivating a capacity to see ourselves in a new light. I think there's so much about day-to-day parenting that is very routine, it's very monotonous. We get caught in certain right ruts with our children. Sometimes every day can feel like, the same one after the other because we get into certain routines and habitual ways of responding to our kids. And sometimes to start fresh, we have to be able to kind of shake ourselves up and see ourselves and our children in a new light. And this is where I think the idea of blessing comes in, because as the verse says, God promises Avram that he will be a blessing. And there aren't many specifics that are conveyed about what that looks like or how that's going to materialize. But I think we can take this idea of being a blessing as a fundamental reality and a promise that we can take into every single day of our parenting lives. Every day where there is uncertainty and we don't know what's going to come at us today, what new challenge is going to come our way. But holding this idea that we as individuals, that we are blessings, each one of us, that we are blessings worthy of care and self-compassion, right? And that we have to take the time to care for ourselves as parents and to fill up our own wells with the water we need. And also to think of ourselves as instruments for spreading blessing in the world. And as our children, thinking of our children as individual blessings as well. So I think that holding that consciousness, that idea of blessing and how it really can permeate every interaction, every moment of challenge. I mean, it's much easier said than done for sure. But I think that is a tool and a framework, a mindset that can help us kind of reorient ourselves sometimes when we're in a rut, when we're in a dark place, when we're struggling and we feel like this is not going the way I want it to go. This is not the pattern that I want. This is not the relationship I want with my child. We can sometimes take a moment to kind of step back from the craziness of parenting and remind ourselves that this is always true. In spite of the ups and downs of our everyday parenting lives, this idea of blessing, of holding blessing, that we are, as individual parents, we are blessings worthy of self-care and self-compassion, and our children are as well. I love that idea. So holding all of those ideas with us, I wanted to just share a few questions that we can begin to ask ourselves as we do the work of thinking about how might we chart a path forward for ourselves with our parenting, wherever you happen to be. We're all in different places. We're all in, different points along the way of this parenting journey. But these are all questions that we can ask ourselves. What are you ready to let go of? What are you prepared to leave behind? Something that might be serving as an obstacle for you in seeing your parenting with fresh eyes and a fresh heart. What is the biggest source of blessing in your parenting life? You think about that for a moment. So the first question, what do you want to let go of? What is one assumption, one habit, one expectation, one truth that is predominant in your parenting life? What do you want? What is that one thing that you want to let go of? and leave behind and see what might open up differently if you let go of that. And what is the source of blessing in your parenting life right now? What is one of your big pain points? We all have pain points. We all have triggers. We all have things that are challenging, those rough spots. What is hardest for you right now in your parenting? I think it's very important to name those rough spots. And in the midst of those rough spots, what is one thing that you can lean into and trust in and hold close to you that will nourish and strengthen you? Whether it's a person, whether it's a phrase, a mantra, a truth. What do you feel is a source of trust for you and nourishment in your daily life, day-to-day life? And then I want to ask you to choose just one thing that you really want to kind of shine your parenting spotlight on in the next couple of weeks. One aspect of your parenting life that is causing you some pain, that's causing you discontent, something that is just kind of vexing for you right now, whether it's with one particular child or it's just how you feel as a parent, whether it's sadness, dissatisfaction, exhaustion, frustration. What is one thing that you want to breathe more blessing into? That you would like to try to bring kind of fresh eyes and fresh heart to? Don't choose a lot of things, just choose one thing. Kind of start small, micro change. And articulate for yourself what that one area is. And I just wanted to share before we close that all of these questions, when we do this work of asking ourselves these questions, I believe that we have to embrace two central qualities at the same time. We have to embrace both chesed and emet in doing this introspection and beginning to think about, oh, what do I need to focus on now? Chesed is loving kindness, and emet is truth-telling. So we have to open ourselves to being honest about what is good and what is hard. But we have to do that truth-telling with gentle compassion and loving kindness for ourselves. Knowing that all of us parents out there have our pain points, have our challenging relationships, have our triggers. We all have them. And if we can kind of hold both of these qualities at the same time, chesed and emet, loving kindness, but also truth-telling, right? Without judgment, then that's what helps us get real with what's really going on. And then we can begin to do the work with full open hearts. So that's what I wanted to start us off with today, this week. And next week we'll come back and we'll talk about another idea that I think is very core, especially to the work of parenting teenagers. And that's navigating our fears and our anxieties, which only seem to amp up as our children get older. So thank you for being with me today, and feel free, if you watch this later on, to share any comments or questions or ideas in the chat and comment on the video, and I will do my best to respond. And wishing you all a lovely afternoon, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.